こんにちは、L です。私を呼ぶときは今後 L ではなく龍崎でお願いします。用心のために。ためらうことなく私の替え玉を殺し、茜のようにこれから長期にわたり拘束したとして、今後世に出る犯罪者が死んでいったら、ここで僕がキラかもしれない。演技だ。お前はキラかもではなくキラだ。一体何をしようとしている？それを狙っているのか？犯人は私が見つけます。
What if, instead of FBI Special Agent Frank Lundy being dispatched to Miami to assist the MPD with the Bay Harbor Butcher case and Sergeant James Doakes conducting his own personal investigation into Dexter Morgan, the MPD enlisted the help of the world's greatest detective, Ryuzaki, from Death Note? Could he do a better job than one of the FBI's smartest and most effective agents and James Doakes' killer instinct? My name is Clix, and today I'm going to cover one of what could be the most ruthless rivalries in criminal history. Now, I know that Toaster already made a video on this topic, but I promise I thought of it before him. But make sure to go check his video out as well. Similar to his battle with ᴊᴏᴜ, L has to gather physical evidence to convict Dexter Morgan, a ruthless serial killer vigilante whose meticulousness within his killing ritual warrants him to leave almost no evidence to begin with. To start, let's go into the stats for each of them. L has an extensive portfolio of being able to solve even the world's most impossible cases, totaling to over 3,500, with hundreds of those same cases being solved as he was chasing Kira. And note that this isn't even the true number, as he has also operated under several aliases such as ᴚᴚ and ᴚᴜᴜ, who are also touted as the world's second and third greatest detectives respectively. Keep in mind that he never even had to step foot out of his bedroom to solve these cases, so perpetrators literally never even saw him coming for them. There are two extremely significant cases that L exemplified his investigative proficiency with: the BBLA murder case and the Kira case, the latter of which ultimately cost him his life, but was solved by his proteges Mello and Nir in the end. Now, the BBLA murder case was a string of gruesome, ritualistic murders that were perpetrated by one of his first proteges, Beyond Birthday. These murders took place in Los Angeles several months before ᴚᴜᴜ came into contact with the Death Note. All of the victims were killed in seemingly impossible circumstances with no clear motive, often in scenarios where the door was locked from the inside with no way of escape, framing them as suicides and leaving intricate clues of who the next victim would be. BB was also born with the Shinigami eyes, so he could tell exactly when a person was going to die, and planned his murders around those times of death as well. L entails the help of a certain Naomi Misura, an FBI investigator on par with the aforementioned Lundy in her investigative prowess, as a proxy to view the crime scenes. L operates from a computer as per usual, but unknowingly Naomi is also working with a fake L, being BB, who has completely imitated his appearance and mannerisms to throw off Naomi and the real L. BB's motive with these murders is to create an impossible case that L can't solve, cementing its unsolvability with his final kill, that being himself. Naomi herself is able to decode the puzzles and stop BB before he can commit suicide, arresting him. Afterwards, the real L talks to Naomi over the phone during the case, and despite BB's goal of trying to make a case that not even L could solve, the real L seems to have solved the case very early on in the story, as far back as BB's first victim, believed Bridesmaid. So despite all of that, all of the tricks and puzzles that Naomi was barely able to solve, L had deduced the motive and the perpetrator before the second victim without even having to examine so much as the crime scene. Because of this, he was so bored with the case that he distanced himself from it, letting Naomi solve the case herself. BB's attempts to trick L through Naomi were absolutely useless, and he died in prison via ᴚᴜᴜ using the Death Note. BB set this up to be an impossible case that no other investigator could solve, but L solved it before even the second victim. But speaking of ᴚᴜᴜ, let's talk about the biggest case L has ever had to tackle, with that being the Kira case. Now, sometime after the BBLA murder case, cases of sequential deaths via heart attack started to occur in various prisons across Japan, a pattern which the public dubbed the work of a god named Kira. These killings were purposefully patterned as heart attacks by high schooler Light Yagami using the Death Note, a magical notebook that will kill anyone whose name is written in it so long as the writer is thinking of their face. He does this to be revered as a god in a world of people he deems to be righteous, eliminating all social deviance from society. L immediately begins his investigation on the matter, joining forces with the NPA, Japan's version of the FBI, and orchestrating his first major play to fake out Kira by taunting him with a death row inmate touting himself as L. Despite skepticism from every single police agency of the world, this move proves to be effective, as Kira kills the proxy, definitively proving that Kira exists, that the killings were in fact murders, and that he is in Japan. This death row inmate's execution by Kira was publicly broadcast live, but only in the Kanto region of Japan. Afterwards, L himself appears on the broadcast and challenges Kira to kill him, but Light can't kill him, which also slightly narrowed down the way that Kira can kill people. When evidence was gathered of the occurrences of these heart attack deaths being during the evening hours, he deduces that Kira could very well be a student as well. He was also able to perfectly gauge Kira's MO and personality based off of a single interaction. He then asks the FBI to send in a team of 12 investigators to survey the families of various NPA members, including Light's father, who is a figurehead in the NPA. After these 12 investigators die of heart attacks, L hones in on Light's shadow Ray Pember, whom Light used to get the names and faces of those performing the surveillance. After that, he places surveillance cameras in the homes of those who Pember was surveilling, with the Yagami household being one of them. After Light successfully manages to continue killing criminals without detection, L removes the cameras, instead choosing to hone in on Light for his perfect alibi. So, in just a few short months, L's prime suspect is Kira himself. L had basically solved the case, but due to lack of evidence and his own death at Light's hands, he failed to convict him. But just imagine, this lone man was almost able to prove that notebooks can fucking kill you. Now, while all of that is impressive and all, Dexter's not exactly featless either. But for brevity's sake, let's just recount his feats up until the end of Season 2. Dexter started killing at the age of 20 in 1991, and up until Season 3, Dexter built up a list of 73 victims operating under complete anonymity for 16 years. Light Yagami, even with the Death Note, only operated as Kira for just 7 years before dying. Now, I'll be a little generous to Light here, because Dexter doesn't live in a world with an orphanage of super geniuses dedicated to taking him down, but it shows a level of effectiveness in Dexter's operation. Dexter operates under a very specific code created by his adoptive father, Harry, which, to sum it up, basically just means that he'll only kill people who deserve it or are a threat to him, with very slight exceptions, so basically the same as Light. You'll notice that I'm making a few comparisons between the two, but other than their charisma and manipulative proficiency, they're not really that comparable. Dexter, as a killer, is abundantly more effective than Light, and if Dexter was given the Death Note, I don't think there would be a show on either accounts. So, to put this simply, Dexter is a shark. There's a fin, and then there's black. And that black is the inside of his stomach, where you will never be found in a million years. And I can say with a good certainty that if Dexter were able to kill L, he could most definitely kill both Nier and Mello too. Getting back on track, Dexter is a skilled forensics expert specializing in blood, being able to deduce the exact way that an individual died in less than a few minutes. Having worked for the Miami Police Department for 12 years, he has an extensive background in detective work as well, being referenced as an exceptional deductive analyst by Mike Anderson, and has also been questioned by James Doakes as to why he's working in a position that he is basically overqualified for. He uses his position to tamper with evidence in order to exact his killings on suspects that he knows are guilty, taking the law into his own hands. But please do note that his killings are not done out of the goodness of his heart or for societal benefits. It's only done to satisfy his homicidal urges, which he serves to fulfill through an objective moral output. He is also adept in marksmanship, jujitsu, surveillance or stalking, and strategic thinking, which is part of why he's been able to operate undetected for a very long duration, as he's been able to rival the strength of Doakes as well, a hardened 75th Ranger Regiment veteran, which, if you weren't aware, literally specializes in assassinating people. One of his biggest strengths is his ability to learn from his mistakes as well, catching his flaws as effectively as he does his victims before they can come back to bite him. But above all, the most dangerous thing about him is that he's a genuinely likable guy. Dare I say a good person, even. Thanks to Harry, he's also mastered the art of relatability. So much so that I even started killing people. All personal anecdotes aside, let's get down to his modus operandi. Dexter's method of selecting and killing his targets is a simple and brilliantly effective method of killing. The first one is select a victim, which would be a suspected murderer. Then the second one, stalking, learning their routine, gathering their evidence, and then confirming that the target meets the code. Then he prepares a kill room, and he'll basically select a place where he can carry out the kill. It might be in that person's home, garage, office, shop, road vehicle, or a vacant building. Most of the time, he chooses a setting that his target is familiar with. Dexter will prepare the room by enclosing it in sheets of plastic so that no traces of evidence will be found. He also tapes photos of his target's victims onto a nearby wall as a reminder of the murders committed. Then he'll actually capture the target, and he'll do this by subduing them and tranquilizing them. Then, once they're on the table and they wake up, he'll slice their cheek a little bit and collect a blood trophy, which is basically just a little snip of their blood that he'll put in a slide, which some of his victims seem to enjoy for some reason. Afterwards, he'll force his victim to face the crimes they've committed. Dexter then might reveal some details about his own life and then portray himself as a monster. Probably some really controversial and heinous stuff, like how he thinks that 9/11 was actually a controlled demolition. And then he'll kill them while they're still alive with one of his various tools. He'll dismember the body, make sure he didn't leave any physical evidence behind, and then dispose of the remains from his boat, which we'll talk about later. This meticulous process of killing ensures that he will never be convicted, even if his safeguarding, charismatic personality is bypassed in any way. And so those are their biggest strengths, proving that they're definitely powerhouses in their own rights, but what about their biggest flaws? There's definitely weaknesses to be exploited on both sides, so let's cover L first. L treats investigations like games, and while there's a level of integrity he applies to them, he only takes on cases that he's interested in. While he wouldn't pass up a case like this, it's hard to believe he would go into it without some level of arrogance that he could solve it rather quickly, and we can see this when L hones in on clues that could lead up dry, such as when he focuses his attention on the meaningless "L, did you know" thread of messages that Light strategically plans out to distract him as he formulates a plan to kill the FBI agents. Dexter could take advantage of this by tampering with crime scene evidence, like when he framed one of his own victims, or deleting his Patrick Bateman alias off of the list of M99 recipients, and L would likely be clueless. While L would probably hone in on an MPD member being the Bay Harbor Butcher, he probably wouldn't suspect Dexter as fast as he did Light. On his fixation on turning his cases into games, however, by publicly challenging Kira on TV, L confirmed to Light that a worthy opponent existed, and instead of forcing Light into mistakes, this gave him the thrill of the game, which pushed Light to be more careful. By the time he did try to force Light's hand with the fake addition to the dying message, Light was already prepared and was able to catch on quickly, only slightly pressuring Light and significantly hindering L's profile. This would have the same effect on Dexter, except Dexter's absence of ego would have him at his most careful, being too cautious to even leave a trace of evidence. Dexter doesn't treat his killings as games, he treats them as a way of life, and any hindrance on that lifestyle would be a detriment to his survival, as he and Harry put it. And for somebody who's so logical, L got way too emotionally invested in winning against Light. The tennis match, the handcuff plan, and his needling of Light all reveal that he wanted the rivalry, which clouded his judgment. He would not give up on his hunch, which, even though right, still diminished his credibility to the rest of the task force. L would quickly lose support within the MPD if he pushed for Dexter's arrest without any solid evidence. L's biggest mistakes were less about being wrong and more about being nearly right yet overconfident. He correctly identified Light as Kira, but underestimated the mysticism of the Death Note. He gave Light too much access, and he got too emotionally entangled in the rivalry. Those tiny cracks were exactly what Light exploited, and Dexter could easily exploit those weaknesses even further than Light did. L also has one glaring weakness that could lead to his exposure, with that being Watari. Even if L never showed up to the scene, Watari would have to show up as his proxy. Dexter could probably use this to his advantage and stalk Watari, getting closer to L and giving him the opportunity to either use Watari as bait or just kill L outright. This doesn't mean that Dexter is completely void of all wrongdoing, so let's go into that as well and see what L could take advantage of. Dexter has an uncanny fixation on his crime scenes, leading to him being made fun of by Doakes by asking him if he got a hard-on while staring at a dead corpse. admiring the knife play. Assuming L were to take Doakes' place in this investigation, it wouldn't be long before he notices his uncanny attraction to murder. Dexter also follows his safekeeping code very liberally in this season when it comes to the ice truck killer, interested more in playing his game than eliminating him as quickly as possible. Dexter spends a lot of season 1 chasing other leads instead of focusing all of his attention onto the ice truck killer, leading Brian, his brother and the perp, to catch him off guard. Dexter could very well be distracted with other cases instead of devoting his full attention to deterring L up until the very last minute. L could create a fake killer to distract Dexter and goad him into making a mistake that could expose him. As opposed to Light, Dexter is also not as good of an actor as he, and while his emotional desolation aids his mask, it detriments his ability to pick up on certain social cues, not even being able to understand basic human intimacy. He is able to avoid Lundy's psychological traps that are very similar to that of L's, however. L could point out these mannerisms when doing a psychological profile on the MPD members as signs of psychopathy, which could profile Dexter as a potential suspect. This also leads to an emotional void within him, which leaves him open for exploitation by those who know how to find that weakness, such as Lila West. As we've seen in L's cases, he is a masterclass at rage baiting and finding out exactly how to make people expose themselves under pressure. Dexter nearly cracks under pressure numerous times, often overestimating the opposition and nearly admitting defeat, when in reality, his detractors couldn't be more wrong. If given the opportunity, L could easily crack Dexter and get even closer to him. But by far, Dexter's biggest mistake would have to be his method of disposing of bodies, which under L's scrutiny would definitely result in him suspecting an MPD member in the first place. While he is cautious, his emotional instabilities are also a major weak link in his operation, as the aforementioned Lila West nearly jeopardized him before he was finally able to catch himself. If you've already gotten this far and you like what you're watching, I'd appreciate it if you could drop a like. You don't even need to drop a sub, the like and the watch time is enough, but if you think my content is worthy of a sub, I'd appreciate that even more. Thanks for watching. So, obviously, this is not going to be an easy contest. Each of the two can counter each other's strengths and weaknesses just as effectively as the other, and without the supernatural edge of the Death Note, it's difficult to gauge who's going to come out on top. But there are some very specific conditions in order for either of them to win. To put it bluntly, L wins in the long game, as he was nearly able to solve the Kira case, but was thwarted by Rem's benevolence for Misa. Had Rem chose not to intervene, Light would most likely have been caught. This forces Dexter into a position where he has to actively play offense against L. L would likely start the investigation anonymously, using a laptop to communicate with the police department and with Watari being the proxy to introduce him. After reviewing the evidence, L would determine that the most likely culprit is a member of the MPD due to the demographic of victims. L would probably also confirm that these individuals were suspects in different murder cases, only being let off the hook due to a lack of evidence. Shortly afterwards, they were killed. Appalled by the amount of information he was already able to gather on his method of killing, Dexter would start to feel pressured. He'd have to get rid of L. Dexter would temporarily pause his killings in complete pursuit of L. Other than the initial bodies found underneath the harbor, L would quickly run out of leads. Due to the precision of the kills, however, he would have to suspect those closely involved in the forensics unit. But when profiling Dexter and Masuka, both of them are just as capable as the other to commit these killings. Both show extreme proficiency in forensics and have solved numerous cases. Neither of them are too perfect. Both Dexter and Masuka make mistakes, especially in their professional lives. And they both have their social quirks, with Masuka being, an interesting case. It would be unlikely for L to hone in on Dexter specifically as the prime suspect for being the Bay Harbor Butcher. As a comparison for this, Lundy was able to profile Trinity based on a single interaction, but never once could he for certain profile Dexter due to his realistic acting and outward masking of his psychopathy, and it's completely ambiguous as to whether or not he actually even suspected Dexter. It soon becomes a stalemate, yet still leaning in Dexter's favor because of his ability to manipulate and change the narrative of a particular case by tampering with evidence. All leads would dry up for L, and the MPD would likely start to turn on him, claiming that the investigation is going nowhere. L could reveal himself to Dexter like he did with Light, but there's no pressure to be added onto Dexter that isn't already there, and since Dexter would be certain that there's no further evidence to convict him, L would have to stop focusing on the forensics team. This gives Dexter an ample opportunity to gain more information on L as he struggles to form a decisive plan of action. Ideally, L would probably try to get closer to both of them until one of them cracks and accidentally spills something confidential. But then again, if push comes to shove, Dexter would have no qualms framing Masuka, and given that L was able to fall for Kira's string of useless suicide notes, I think it's plausible that L would follow this as credible evidence. As of Season 2, Masuka becomes the lead forensic investigator, putting him in a position that would give him the means to control the evidence surrounding these killings. While his personality is perverse and obnoxious, L could infer that this is just a cheesy act designed to throw others off of profiling him as dangerous. While Dexter could stalk Watari for more information, L would likely have safeguards around him using that method, as he's quite confident that Light wouldn't be able to figure out his true identity no matter his connections or how much information he gave to Light. Which brings us to the question of Dexter even being able to kill L. How? At this point in the battle, Dexter and L have two completely separate mindsets. L is thirsty for the chase, while Dexter is fighting for his survival. Dexter currently has the upper hand in this scenario, being able to lead on L with a framing of Masuka, but L would eventually catch on if Dexter has no further plan of determining who L is. But if L came in to personally investigate them in the hopes of pressuring them, Masuka likely would crack under the pressure and say something incriminating, even if it weren't the case, which would be further corroborated with the framing by Dexter. Masuka would slowly become the prime suspect to L. Would L begin to suspect that Masuka was being framed? Possibly, but given that there's no other evidence, and with Dexter having a sound alibi, not being too perfect and not being too out in the open, he would have no evidence to back up his hunch. He'd have to treat him the same as Light and pull the investigation off of him. It's at this point that the investigation would reach its climax, as if Dexter doesn't take this opportunity to eliminate L will further scrutinize Dexter with some hidden surveillance cameras and deduce that the killings have completely stopped, meaning that both of them could be implicated, and will subsequently defeat Dexter in the long run. But at this point, L is doomed. Dexter has the perfect opportunity to capture L at this point, as we've now gone into the realm of who is physically stronger. Now, L has shown his skills in martial arts before, but it won't matter if Dexter gets the jump on him first. Dexter can take down his victims with a tranquilizer in less than a second, which means that the only thing left of L that'll exist after Dexter is done with him will be a blood slide. And since Masuka was the primary focus of the investigation, he'll most likely be the one to take the fall, leaving Dexter with the perfect victory. Again, this matchup could honestly go either way, but I feel like logically, this would be the most realistic outcome. L only ever chases after those who treat a case as he does, a game. This is Dexter's way of life on the line. Every other case that he's been able to solve was due to the perpetrator's incompetence. In the words of L,
he who strikes first wins.
And L simply can't strike when he doesn't have a target to hit. But always remember that a character is always as strong or as smart as the writer wants them to be in the end. There's no true definitive winner, only the more compelling narrative. But I want to know what you think. Let me know down below if I'm an absolute moron, or if you agree with this take. Either one helps me out. With that, this is where we part ways. My name is ᴊᴏ, and I'll see you in the next one.